Hi, this is the video for our second Create with Code project. I've been calling it the Create with Code Farm. I'm going to walk you through the entire project and put this in Google Classroom so that you have it and you can kind of move at your own pace. I'll probably stop throughout and edit the video for different points. So if you see some weird jumps, I apologize for that, but I want to make sure I get everything included that I intended, and I don't know that I'll get it on the first go. So anyways, let me go ahead and just walk you through it. I've already downloaded from Classroom my CwC animal feeder.unity package. There was another package in there for our first project. This is labeled number 2 animal feeder. Make sure you have this one, download it, and put it onto your desktop or somewhere that you can easily access, like a downloads folder. I'm going to create a new project. It's 3D, and for this I'll just call it Farm. I already have that one named. I've done this project a couple times now, so let's call this Farm Example. That looks better. And for my sake, I'm just going to put it onto my desktop like this, and I'll also create a folder called Farm Example. That way I can differentiate, and you'll see on my desktop I have a new blue folder called Farm Example. I'll select that folder. This looks great, and I'll hit create. This will take just a second to load up. The point of the game is to have a sort of almost Space Invader style game where we have animals coming from the top and they will be hungry, and we're going to move a farmer on the bottom as our player to the left and to the right, shooting food at the animals in order to quell their hunger. So there's a lot of different components that go into this. The easiest part obviously is going to be our camera positioning. Player controller is going to look very similar to what we did last time, where we will be using the transform to move our character back and forth, but we'll be introducing constraints and instantiation, which is how we shoot things. So there's going to be a shooter style element. So when I first come in, I am in the sample scene, but we already have a scene set up for us. So I will go and take this project and just drag it into the projects area like this, and hit import and give it a second. It's loading in all our models. If your scene is not laid out the same way mine is, I would encourage you to do so. And if you don't remember how, you can go up here to the layout button on the upper right, choose default. It will look like this, and I tend to take the game window located right there and drag it kind of off to the middle on the right, and it snaps here. When you do that, the camera is called free aspect, and I go 16 by 9. This is a traditional kind of viewpoint. So go into your scenes folder, and there's 2 scenes, prototype 2 and sample scene. I'm going to, for me on a Mac, control right click on sample scene to delete it. I don't need this one. And then I will double click on prototype 2, and I'll hit save. Oh, put my sample scene back in. But we go to prototype 2, now we can delete it. I apologize for that. Delete. We don't need this either. If you get that, if you don't get it, it's okay. I'm just gonna hit delete. That is the lighting for the first scene. Great. So our camera, our main camera, is already set up. I'm gonna double click it here in the hierarchy to be looking downwards and get a scope of this grassy field. We of course have our directional light, which is our sort of sun for the world, and we have an environment game object that it's really nothing. It's just holding our ground, our left border, and our right border. And I would like for you to leave these alone. Just leave the environment alone. We shouldn't be touching that. But we're going to be adding some things into the game. So let's go down to our, let's go over here to our scene. And this little gizmo here is our snap to for our camera. It lets our camera go exactly where we want it to go. I want my scene view to look like my game so that's easier to work with. So I'm going to click on this green node at the very top on the Y, and it will snap to the top. So our scene looks a lot like our game. Great. So down here in the Assets folder, Course Library, we have a couple folders. We'll start by adding our player into the game. So there's a Humans folder. There's a bunch of different models, and they are prefabbed, which means they're pre-made models that already have some other components on them. So we have like, this one has the model, so the transform and the animation, which is great. We won't be playing with animation in this, but it's there. So I will take just any one of these, and the way I'd prefer for you to do it is to take and drag it not into the scene. If you do that, you'll just have to reset your position, which we tend to forget to do, but now I can see it's lined up well with my camera. But instead, I'm going to delete that. Just drag it into your hierarchy, which automatically snaps it to 0, 0, 0. Rename this character player. Press return to make sure that name saves. So I have a player, and it's blue in the hierarchy because it is a prefab. If you accidentally double click on it, you might end up in this scene looking thing that has a bunch of stuff in your hierarchy, or it might be black in your scene. That means you went into the prefab. You're trying to modify this pre-constructed model. To get out of it, there's a little left arrow by the name in the hierarchy. And there you go, back to normal. I am also going to go back into my course library. I can either do it here or here, and I will find my animals, and you have 3 different types. You can choose any 3 that you want. I like to go with bigger animals for this game, makes it a little bit easier to see. I'm going to take a moose and drag it into my hierarchy. Let's go let me choose another animal. Get a horse. And finally, let's go get a cow. I'm not going to need to rename these. That's fine the way they are. I don't really like these long names in the hierarchy, but that's just a personal preference. They already have like their scales set up like in different numbers, you can tell. That's what these are here. They're general size. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Let me go to my cow. So you can tell they're in the same place as my player, not where we want them to be. So our game view is about 14 units this way and 14 units to this way, so to the left and to the right. So let's take our first animal. I want to take my moose, and I want to move it, let's put it right in the middle. So on the X, I don't need to change anything because right now X is 0. That's left and right. Y is up towards us in the camera. So Y would be, if I rotate my scene, would be this green direction, which it's not really what we want to change for this style of game. So instead we want to change our Z, and our depth is about 14. So I'm going to go to Z of 14. And even though the moose's head is a little bit above where we want it to be, let's just rotate it on the Y to 180. I think it's just the antlers. So it's facing us, and that looks really good. So let's go to our horse. Let's take our horse and let's move it to the right. So that would be on the x-axis, and it would be a positive number. Let's go positive 14. And on the y, nothing. And on the z, let's go up 14. And I'm going to rotate it on the y. The reason why it's the y is because it's the axis. Like it's this green bar here that's going through it that we're rotating around. That's why it's the y-axis. 180. And finally, I'm going to take my cow. Here it is, right inside my player. And instead of positive 14, let's go negative 14. So it goes to the left. Like that. Y of 0 and Z of 14. And on the rotation, Y of 180. And there you go. You've got your animal turned around. That's okay. That's fine for what we're doing. But we obviously want to add in something to feed them. So I'm going to go back to Course Library. Go to the Food folder. And we have a bunch of different foods to choose from. I think pizza is probably the best one, though. So I'm going to go put a pizza slice into my hierarchy. Now this pizza is very small. So I'm going to move it forward. Let's move it up a little bit in front of our player. And we'll make it bigger using the scale. So X of 0, keep it right in the middle for now. Y of 0, because we don't need to lift it up. And then Z, let's put it on 5, so it's sitting up front. And then let's change the scale to maybe 2 by 2 by 2, I think. That looks okay. This window looks pretty small here, but when we maximize our game to play, this will look a lot bigger. So there you go. We have all of the sort of necessary components in our game, but we need to start by adding a player controller. So go into Assets, and let's add a folder. So you can either control right click in this area here, or there's a create button for you probably. I'm going to hit this. I'm going to add a folder and call it scripts. Press return. I'm going to go into that folder, so double click it. And then I'm going to add a new C# script. The name is, don't press return yet, wait until this is done. Capital P, player, capital C, ONTROLLER, controller, player controller. Press return. See if I zoom in a little bit for it. I don't know if that helps you much. It's taking a second. There you go. That might help you see it some. But this is the name I spelled out, and this is my preview or my inspection of this script. So I'm going to double click it, and it should open up Visual Studios. Visual Studios can be a little finicky at times. If you already have it open, sometimes I need to go down here and hold it down and hit quit in order for it to work well, and then retry it. But yeah, close that. Okay, so here is Visual Studios loading our script. So we're going to think logically through what this script is going to ask of us. So the first thing it's going to ask of us, let me delete these comment lines here. When I first come in, I always like to just read this one more time. It's just a good habit to get into, just double, triple checking the name of these scripts. I know those changes I just made aren't saved because I have a little circle up here in the tab. So we need to be able to move our character to the left and to the right. And we want to do that using controls. So let's start with saying we need to have controls. We know that the controls are really represented by a number. If we're moving to the right, then it is a positive number, the maximum being positive 1. If we're moving to the left, then it is a negative number, the maximum being negative 1. So if it's a number, we definitely don't want it down here inside our methods. We want it to be held up here in a variable. So line 7, I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to press return once and go back to line 7 and create a little space. This feels comfortable to me. Let's make it public. And this public number is going to be it's going to be in a range between 0 and 1. So since it's between 0 and 1, it's going to be a float because that's a decimal. And this is going to be our horizontal, so left and right, input, capital I. We've been talking about naming conventions. The first letter is lowercase. The next word, the first letter of the second word is an uppercase. And at the end of this line, I need a semicolon. Great. So a public decimal number nicknamed horizontal input. And we've done this before. We've gotten controls before. I'm going to go down to line 17, and I'm going to call horizontal input. I'm going to set it equal to input. So whatever I press, get, that's spelled get with a capital G, button. I was thinking ahead a little bit down. We're going to say get button down. So when we press the button down. Oh, you know what? I apologize. Get axis. That's a mistake. I was thinking about like a firing button earlier. So, I make mistakes sometimes when trying to think too many pieces here. We're getting to axis. We're trying to find our buttons for left and right axis. And the name of that axis in our project settings is called horizontal, like that. And if you don't remember, I just want to pull this up again. Where do I find that? If I go back to Unity, I go to Edit, Project Settings, and I have an input manager, and it asks me what are my different axes, and sure enough I have an axis called horizontal, and the name is spelled right there. If I made it a lowercase h here, you see the name changes here. It would need to change in my script because this capital H1 wouldn't exist anymore. So I'm going to keep it capital, but that's where that name comes from. It just needs to match that or it won't find it, and that includes capitalization. So we'll close that window again. So we're getting our left and right axis. Great. Now, when we're moving, we know we're going to use our transform. So we want this to be an update because we want to always be checking. When we do controls, we always try to do it in an update. So we're going to be using our transform, not a rigid body, which we normally would do. For these style of games, are pretty simple right now. We're not really using physics. Let's do transform dot, and the method for moving is translate. We're not rotating or anything else. And let's open up some parentheses. So we know we translate along an x, a y, or a z axis. So we call that, as you well know, a vector 3. And since it's going to be to the left or the right, we're going to call it right. Because remember, left is always just the opposite of right. Vector 3 dot right. So right now, that number, as you can see this right here, this little thing, is shorthand for writing 100. Sorry, yep. So that's 1 on the x. So if we run this right now, it would just, actually, let's just run it. Let's just see what it does. It should slowly move him to the right. So I'm going to go back into Unity, and let's take our player, and I'm going to add component, and I can just type in, oh, there's player controller right there. Great. You can tell I've done this. And I'm going to press play, and you should see it move into the right. There you go. Maybe slow's a strong word, like not the right word. There it goes. Just runs off to the right. Because right now it's moving at a rate of 60 frames per second, I think is what our running rate is. And so it's just going to move, pretty decently fast. I said slowly earlier, but I was thinking about time.delta time. So let me go back to Visual Studio. But we have no controls here. Also, we want to set how quickly it moves. So we want to multiply it by a number. So obviously we know that a number needs to be coming up here in our variables. And let's do a public. And for now, let's just do an int. Usually for something like speed, I like to use an int, a whole number, 10, 1, 11, 12, something. Let's set the speed. Set that name to speed. And I'm going to put a semicolon there. And let's multiply this by speed. We'll set this in the inspector since we didn't set it here. We could set it right now automatically, but I'm choosing not to do that. And then finally, let's go ahead and multiply it by time.delta time, just to be good programmers. So that is your left and right controls. Oh, wait, is it all your left and right controls? We're missing something. We're missing our horizontal input. Right now, it's 1, 0, 0, multiplied by whatever we set our seed by time.delta time. So it's going to move automatically. If we want it to only move when we press our buttons, we still need to multiply it again by your horizontal input. Whenever you press these buttons, you get a number, and that number is going into here, and that's what it's multiplying by. That's how it knows to move left and right. If it's a positive number, right. Negative, left. So let's go back into our game. Let's go to our player, and now we have a speed. We need to set our speed. I'm going to try something kind of, arbitrary. Let's go 20, and I'm going to press play. And I think A and D and also your arrow keys are set, and there you go. Got a pretty good left and right. But we still have a problem. By the way, look at my horizontal input here. When I press right, you can see it goes up to 1. And it hits those decimals on the way down. When I go left, it goes to a negative 1. So that's why we need to have a float for that. Great. So that's working okay. I haven't saved yet, and that's driving me a little crazy, so I'm going to hit Command S. Perfect. So now let's start thinking about how we can do some constraints. So sorry about this weird jump, but I told you there would be a few. I need to stop sometimes, check some notes, make sure might set myself up for the way I want to teach you this material. So we have a problem right now with our current player controller. It takes a transform and translates it along the x-axis, left and right, but we have no constraints. There's nothing stopping our player to just keep pressing to the right and just going off screen. And the same for the left. So we need to set up what we call constraints. Constraints, something to stop our player. Now, there's a lot of different ways of doing this. We could just drop in some walls or something, but we don't want to just put arbitrary things in the game that we could just fix with our code. And this game doesn't need a fence or anything like that. I mean, we could do that, but let's just fix it with coding. That's a lot cleaner, and honestly, that's what we should be doing. So I'm going to go back to my script, and let's think through this step by step. I'm going to go to line 19. I'm going to press return twice. I'm just going to create a little space for myself here. And we've done this before, but we call this a conditional. Conditional. That's the phrase for this. So this is something I probably would test you on, right? A conditional is basically true when a condition is met. So this is if this thing happens, then this other thing happens. It's like a cause and effect. So that's really it. And some of you have seen this because we did a jump. We asked you to find a way to make your card jump in our first project. And we did a conditional, which is an if statement. If is one of those. There's like when statements. There's different ways to approach this, but we're going to do if. So let's think what our problem is. So basically we're saying if we reach this far side, so the way we move is on our x-axis, and that's all determined by it's all controlled by our transform on our player. So if our transform dot position dot x, so the position on the x of the player's transform is, let's start with the left. If it is, so here's 0 and this is negative. So if it's less than a negative number, and the furthest we want to be able to go is probably right in front of this cow. And so let's look at our cow's x position. -14. If it's -14, so if we ever reach -14, let's press return. Then we're going to take our transform dot position and we are going to make it equal to, well, we know it's a transform dot position, so it's going to have an x, y, z, and there's a shorthand for that. I'm going to set it to a new vector 3. Oops. Get a little greedy there. And let's tell it what that vector 3 is. So first, do we want to change the x-axis? Well, yeah, we want it to be no more than -14. So we want to set it to -14 so that it won't go past that point. So I'm going to put a comma. Do we want to change the y? No. If it ever gets to that point, we want it to stay the same y. So we're going to set it to the same transform dot y. I'll start transform dot position dot y, and I put a comma. And finally, do I want to change the z-axis? Do I want to make it go forward? And the answer to that is no. So let's set that to a transform dot position dot z, and we should be able to close our parentheses and put a semicolon. And it looks good. Our transform dot position will be now a new xyz, which is going to be -14. So all the time in update, it's always going to be setting it to -14 if we ever try to go past -14. So let's save this because I know it's not saved up here. And I will press play. I'll give it a second to compile. Press play. Oh, this is an error. Transform does not get position. This is good to see. Asset scripts player controller, line 23 on the 23rd position. I typed in the word position incorrectly. And look, my Visual Studio didn't even tell me that. So line 23, there's a missing an I right there. Great. Let's look really quick and make sure I got all the rest. sometimes words just kind of like become a blur. You type them a lot and then you forget, you drop a letter here and there. Great, so it's running. Let's see if I can go past 14. Nope, I can't. Let's just check and see our player. See, our position is -14. I can go to the right, but I can't go past 14 because every frame it's setting back to -14. But what about going to the right? Well, like we could try to do like a very similar thing, and I think we probably will. Let's just do it the same way for this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy lines 21 to 24, Command C for me. Go to end line 24, press return. So it's outside of these brackets. So I want to keep that little line there, and I'm going to paste Command V. So we're going to say if the transform dot position on the X is trying to be go past, so go greater than, so further to the right, +14, then I'm going to set my transform dot position to a new vector 3, +14, and keep everything else the same. Command S. Let's check that out. All right, press play. So go to the left, that still works. Let's go to the right. There you go, perfect. We have some constraints. So our player can only move left and right, and left and right. That's kind of fun. I like that. Great. Now, you probably should be screaming at the computer right about now. And you should be saying, what's up with these numbers? Because right now, we never put numbers down in our methods. And you would be right. So we're going to handle that with a variable. And it so happens that this number is the same across all of these. Just one of them happens to be a -14, and the other one is a +14. So let's go here to our variable space and press public, and this is a whole number, so we just go int. I think we'll go int. Let's do float because that number changes in between, and I want to point. No, let's do int. I like int. And I'm going to call this our x range. So our range of values from left to right on the x-axis. And I'm going to set that equal to 14. So now I can go replace every instance of 14, not -14, just 14, with x range. So negative x range. Negative x range here. Same down here. And finally, x range right there. Boom. And I like to go test this out. I'm going to save it, go back into Unity. I'm going to check on my player and see if I can still see. Yeah, x range is set to 14. You know, it might even be better. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to set this to a private. We don't need that to ever change. So let's go private. Int. Save that. So I don't want to, I never want to change this in my inspector, and it helps kind of keep all this clear. There you go. That looks better. Same thing with horizontal input. I don't really need to see that, but it's okay for now. Just always want to check and make sure it works. Great. Looks good. Looks good. All right. Our next step will be to take our, we're going to be adding the ability for our pizza to move forward. So for us to do that, we're going to need to prefab. We're going to add like a little script to our pizza here, and then give it the ability to move forward. So over here in our scripts area, let's create a C# script, and I will call this move forward. Forward. F-O-R-W-A-R-D. Capital M, capital F, because this is not a variable. This is the name of the script. Give it a second. It will try to create. And there we go. So let's open this up inside of Visual Studios. So think through this. Same kind of thing we've done before. We need to create let's make a public And let's do int speed, so we know how fast it moves forward. Great. And we've done this before. This one does not need controls, so it's going to work the same way as our player. We're going to use the transform dot translate along a vector 3. So, and this time we want it to move along a z-axis. So we want to move forward, so x, y, z. And we're going to multiply this by our speed, and then times time dot delta time, and let's put a semicolon. Well, it looks pretty good, I think. Let's go ahead and set our speed inside of the code, just so we know that it already has one. We're going to set this equal to 40, and I'll hit Command S. I think that looks great. I'm going to show you something kind of cool about this, the way to test this. We'll go back into Unity, give it a second to compile. Looks like it's good already. Let's go to our pizza object now in the hierarchy. Here it is. That does look actually, I mean, maybe I'm really hungry. That looks semi-good. I'm going to close some of these shutters over here just for my own sake. Got all these things open. I don't like all that. Okay, let me just close this mesh render. Okay, add component, and I'll start typing in move forward, and we have a speed here. And let's press play. Let's see if that works. Boom, it's going pretty fast actually. Let me go, I'm going to reduce my speed. Let's try 20. Press play. That looks okay. I'm going to try 10. I just want to see what feels a little more comfortable. I want it to be like not so fast I don't get to see it actually like move. You know, it kind of catches you at the beginning when the game starts. 10's okay. I might play with this more later on. So this will be our bullet every time. And we're not really going to need it in the hierarchy. So what I'm going to do is go to Assets, create a new folder, and let's call this thing a prefab folder. So we already had a prefabbed pizza, but we've changed that prefab in the scene by adding this move forward script. So now we're going to make our own prefab. So in the prefab folder, I can just drag and drop. It'll ask me, do I want to make a variant of what we already had or make our new prefab? And we're going to do original prefab. Done. And you can see that this thing now in our projects folder, prefabs folder, has our forward movement script. Here's a cool way to test it. When you press play, you should be able just to drag prefabs into the scene and just watch them go. I love doing this. This is like so fun. You kind of like lay them down here. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So that's how we know they're working the way they're supposed to. Now you'll see they all say in your hierarchy they are clones, so they're copies of this original prefab, and they're still in the game. Like I can still go find them. They're still flying along with their brethren off into an infinite space of pizza-ness. But once I stop, boom, those clones are gone. Later on, we'll talk about the need to destroy those objects, because imagine you're playing a shooter game, you have a lot of bullets in the scene. That will slow your game down a lot. But we're not. I don't think we're going to be. I don't think I'm planning on having that you do that. So now let's make this something that the player shoots. So if it's going to be involving our player, because our player is where the pizza is going to come from, I can actually get rid of this pizza now in the hierarchy. So I'm going to control right click in the hierarchy and hit delete. I don't need it because I already have it in a prefab. Done. I can just drag it in anytime I want. And I don't really want the game to start off with a pizza. So we're dealing with our player. Let's go into our scripts folder. Player control. Hey, sorry for another weird jump. I just wanted to take a pause real quick and make sure I was heading in the right direction for you. And yeah, we're looking good. So when I come back into my player controller, we need to start making it so that let me save this really quick, Command S. Oops, here we go. Make sure I'm in Visual Studio. That we are set up. I'm going to just leave some notes here for myself. I like to leave some comments on line 18. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to do this for you. So this top part is gets our controls and moves us left and right. Ugh. And I'm going to go down here. There's a little gap here for me already in line 22. Remember, you don't have to do this, but I think there's 2 forward slashes, and these leave comments in our code, and that's just a good thing to do. See, these are our constraints. So everything below here is what stops us from moving any further on the left and the right. So I'm going to end line 30, and we're going to add a very important piece of code here. And this will allow our player to shoot the pizza forward. So we're going to do another conditional. So if, and this probably looks a little familiar for you, but if input dot get, let's do get key down. So we did get button down, and button is different than key in that button is like whatever the project is saying a button is. So your jump button. Your jump button can be set to anything, X, Y, A, B, whatever, start. But we're looking for specific key name. So we're going to say get key down, open up some parentheses, and we're going to find key code. So the name of the key specifically, and we're looking for the space key. We're going to use the space bar. I'll do that. So I'm going to go to the end of this line. I don't need a semicolon because it's an if statement, or it's part of a method here. I'm going to press return, open up some brackets, and this is a very important word, so please know what this is. This is something we're going to use a lot. It is called instantiate. And instantiate just means to make a copy of something, to create an object, to bring an instance of. In our example, we're going to be making a copy of the prefab of the pizza. So we want to make a copy. But we need to set a couple conditions here. So I'm just open up some brackets. But it's going to give me an error, but that's okay. This says instantiate. So first we need to tell it what to instantiate. Now, we're going to use a variable to do that because we already have an object. We just need to tell it what object. So I'm going to go to end line 9. I'm going to press return. I'm going to press return twice, create a little space here. I like to keep my numbers separate, and then my name separate, and then my game object. So this is what this is going to be. So we're going to make a public capital G game object, capital G, capital O. So this is not the name of anything, so the G would be capital. This is not like a variable name. And then now we'll call this pizza prefab. So this is now looking in the inspector, in the inspector inside of the Unity editor for a game object that is called pizza prefab. We'll just have to put that in. So I'm going to go back here to line 35. And inside my instantiate, I got to tell it 3 things. The first thing I need to tell it is what, then I need to tell it where, and then we need to tell it its rotation, which probably weren't thinking that was going to be the answer to that one. But yeah, we got to tell it if it's rotating as it comes out, where we want this thing to come from, and what it is. So our what, you don't have to type that out, I'm sorry. Our what is going to be, well, we want to, whenever we hit the space bar, we want our pizza prefab to come out. Where do we want it to come from? Well, we want it to come from our player and our player's position. So we should probably look at its transform dot position because this is on our player. And then finally for our rotation, let's say I think we're going to do it as our transform dot position. No, we got to do its own rotation. Yeah, that's right, because we have no rotation. I apologize. I had a brain fart there. Pizza prefab. Ooh, that was ugly. Don't do that. Try that again. Pizza prefab. Boom. Don't worry, it's giving me all that. Pizza prefab, period. It's transform dot rotation. There you go. There you go. That feels a lot better. So that's the right code. And I put a semicolon at the end. So it will now, because we didn't put a rotation set on our pizza prefab, it will set that to 0, but it needs to know that it is 0. So great. Let's save that, Command S. We put this on our player controller. Great. I'm back into Unity. Give it a second to compile. Move this down just a little bit. I didn't realize I was sitting so high in the editing screen. Alright, it's acting a little slow. Let's take my player. And it asks, what is my pizza prefab? Well, this time, if I click here, this is going to pull everything in the scene. If I go to assets, it has everything like laid out in here, and that's just a little more complicated than I want. So instead, I'm going to hit this little lockbox on my inspector. Boom. This won't change. So if I click on anything, it will stay as the player. So I'm going to go to assets, go to my prefab folder, and I'm going to drag in that pizza prefab like that. Done. I can unlock this now. So now, let's test it out. Let's press play. Move left and right, and if I press spacebar, I shoot a pizza. Done. That looks good. I can spam that. Alright. Now you can probably tell this is slowing my game down a little bit. I saw some frames drop right in the middle of that. It got slow for just a second. But we can fix that. So I think I said earlier that we weren't going to be doing a destroy thing, but I think we're going to have to do that. So let's also, you know what, let's take our animals, let's prefab them too, because we don't want them to start off here, we want them to be running downwards. And they can use the same script essentially as our pizza. Our move forward script, they're just going to move forward at speed. But because we made this a public int, we can change it for them individually, so they can all have their own speeds. So I'm going to go over here to my moose, and I'm going to make these a prefab as well. So I'm going to add a component for my moosh and add the move forward script, and just give them different values. So I might go for like a 6 on this speed on the moose. And let's go to the horse. Let's add the move forward script, and maybe go, it should be faster, like a 12. And then cow. Actually, cows and moose are pretty fast animals. I'll make the cow just a little bit faster than the moose. And I'm going to press play just to see how they move. Yeah, that feels okay. That feels good. So those guys are going to just keep moving. That sounds good. And we're going to do the same thing with them. Since we've added this move forward script, I'm going to prefab them. So just drag them down one at a time. And let's do original prefab. Boom. Original prefab. And original prefab. And we don't have a spawner set up for them. Our player is the spawner for the pizza food. And it is getting late. But we will probably be setting that up in just a second. So let's go ahead and make it so that we, let's do it this way. Let's go to our assets, scripts. Let's create a new script. We're going to be destroying our projectiles off screen. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to C# script, and let's call it out of bounds. So capital O, capital O, capital B. Double click it here. And we're going to go back and add that to the pizza in just a little bit. Let's do, we need to say where out of bounds is. Like if the top position of our screen is. Because we want it to be destroyed whenever it goes above this here. And we set our, now we don't want to put it right here at this edge. So we know that this Y position, not Y, Z position, oof. Z position was 14. So we can do anything above 14. I might do 20 or even 30. Let's do 30. 30 is fine. So let's do we don't need to change this number. So let's do a private int, and we'll call it top, maybe let's do top border. Okay. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and set it to 30. We said we were going to do that. So there you go. We have a top border and it's set to 30, and that's going to be a Z. So we're going to do this in our update. So we're the same thing. We need to do a conditional. If this thing reaches that. The reason I didn't put it on the move forward script because this move forward script is shared amongst the animals and the pizza. Even though the animals aren't anticipating to go above 30, let's just create a separate script for now. Later on, we'll want to be more compressed and try to put, everything together if we can. So on the out of bounds script, on the update, let's say if. So if we want to look at the position, we need to call the transform and then find its position. And we're looking specifically for the position on the Z. And we're saying if the position is more than, so if it's greater than this top border, then for the next line, open some brackets. We want to, this is a great line, we're going to use this a lot, destroy it itself. So if you're going to destroy itself, there's a couple ways to do that, but the way we should be doing this is game object, destroy game object. Let's close that off with a semicolon and hit save. Now the reason I'm doing this is I want to show you how to do what we call an override. So this is important. Oh, transform to the mechanism. Oh, I did it again. I spelled on my out of bounds script, I spelled position wrong. Look at that. There you go. Missing that I every time. I didn't know that was something I struggled with. So I'm going to go back into Unity. Give it a second. There you go. Looks good. Don't see any errors down here at the bottom. And I'm going to go back to my prefab on my pizza. And I'm going to add a component. And it's called out of bounds. And yeah, that should be good. Let's see if, I wonder if that just automatically saves across all of them. That should do that. Do open prefab. Just to look. I'm a little rusty on that. Yeah, out of bounds is already applied here. So I'm going to go back to here. Just to test it, I'm going to press play. And let's zoom in. Let's go find my player. And let's see if we can watch a pizza go. So press this. Oh, gotta be click on the game. See if it destroys itself. Let's look here. Oh, destroyed. Press it again. So here's the clone. Destroyed. Great. That will stop us from having to worry about us clogging up the game with too many pieces of pizza. So we probably need to go back down and let's add onto our out of bounds script. Let's do the same thing with our animals. So out of bounds, let's do a bottom border. Same thing. Private int and bottom border. And let's set this equal to, so we know our player is at on the transform 0, 0, 0 right here. So it really just needs to be below this. Let's do something like -10, just so it's totally off screen before this happens. -10 semicolon. And let's do the same thing. Instead of just saying if, so this is another thing I would test you on. If this is true, then do this. Else, if this other thing is true, So if you're doing more than one if statement, this is what you do it. Else if, outside of these right here. And we're basically going to copy this here with the transform dot transform. Oh my gosh, man. Position. There's that I. Got it. On the Z, same thing. So up and down is less than our bottom border. Go to the next line. Open up some brackets. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to destroy this game object and semicolon that, and that looks good. Make sure I put that I there. Now I'm freaked out. Saved it. Gonna go back into Unity. Now this script is obviously not on our animals yet, so if I just, so there's a couple ways to do this here, right? If I do it here in my prefabs folder, you'll see how it looks different. So if I click on my cow here, this is open prefab. But if I click on it here, it has all this other stuff now. It says prefab open, select, overrides, all this. So if we add the component to our cow here, we add that out of bounds script, then it'll go to overrides, and I can hit this. Let me show. There will be a thing that shows up that says apply all. You can hit apply all, and now it will apply it to the one that's in the folder, which now will be all of the cows going forward. So that's another option. I just like to do it on the prefabs if I'm going to do it on a prefab. If you do it in the scene, it will only affect the one that is in the scene until you hit the override button and hit apply all. So that's worth noting. And I will probably ask you that as a question on the test. If you want to put a script on every object in the game that's a prefab, you need to make sure you hit overrides or do it in the folder. So that's really worth noting. And that's a thing that people commonly miss. Let's put it on our moose. I'm just going to do it here. Out of bounds. Easy. Let's press play and let's see if these guys get destroyed. I'm going to look at my hierarchy. If they get below the screen, gone, gone, and the moose is slower. So yeah, there you go. That's all working. That will make sure our game runs super, super smooth.